Rabbi, thanks for joining. We are live here.
Daniel, good to see you. Shalom Aleichem.
Nice to see you. Aleichem shalom. Okay, so
Yeah,
for those who did you actually just tune into Bibi Netanyahu's speech?
I did.
What were your thoughts?
My thoughts are when you are the greatest orator in the history of your country, sometimes when you're really good, people are disappointed because they expect the greatest speech in the history of Israel every time.
Understood. What? So the question for me is that, and Amit Siegel was speculating that Trump actually asked Bibi to not. That Bibi actually asked Trump to come out and say that there will be no Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, so that he can have a little bit of room from his right wing constituency that definitely wants Israel to apply sovereignty. Do you think there's any truth to that, or do you think that Bibi
I
will?
would note the president didn't use the word sovereignty. The president said annexation, and the president is well known for using words of contracts. So the idea that I think there's still doors that Trump left open. I certainly think that Bibi was aware of what Trump was going to say before he said it. I don't know if he had any hand in it. I don't know what his perspective was before. But certainly after the president said that, there was nothing to say. So the thing with the map was very nice. We had enemies last year. Those enemies are dead. The job is not done yet.
Yep.
And speaking to the hostages was a very powerful move. And the rest of the speech was just, we're still at war, nothing has changed. And the idea that within the same silly paradigm, that in 1967, you have speeches from the Rebbe that are so clear about what needs to be done, so clear about what the penalty will be if we don't act within logic, if we don't follow military advice. The Rebbe said many, many times that just like in Jewish law, when you have a health concern, you have to go to the doctor's advice. He said, with this, you need to follow the military's advice. And for 50 years, Israel has chosen not to, 60 years, Israel has chosen not to do that and have acted like trying the same thing again and again, and will have a different result. And the Western world has had the same false idea, the idea of a two-state. So the concept of a two-state solution is a lie. A two-state solution implies there are 0 states now, and to solve this, we'll create 2 states. What we're talking about here is a second state solution, because there is one state, a thriving state with a right for democracy, so rights for all, blossoming democracy, an amazing country. We're talking about a second state, and the question is, what is that state going to look like? So they, for years, have created this false concept of a two-state solution and have tried to fit this Western square peg into a Middle Eastern round hole and have been shocked when it hasn't worked for 60 years without being able to change anything. And if you don't change anything, you're not going to fix anything.
That's true.
So without a huge paradigm shift, which he wasn't able, which there was no possibility of in this speech, very little changes afterwards. He delivered it brilliantly. He said everything right. But at the end of the day, nothing has changed.
I want to get right into the issue I originally invited you on here, which was the representative Thomas Massie took aim at you the other day. For those who are unfamiliar with the story, can you just provide a little bit of color?
Sure. So Thomas Massie is a congressman from northern Kentucky. It's a very Republican district. His race is the primary. He came to power several years ago in a 3-way race that he won for the primary. He hasn't had a serious opposition since. And he has prided himself on being Mr. No, on voting against things, especially things that have a consensus. When Congress wanted to recognize Emmett Till, for example, by outlawing lynching, he was the one no vote. He said lynching's already a crime. He was the one no vote on condemning anti-Semitism. He was the one no vote on condemning sexual assault of Jewish women on October 7th. And he has made a name for himself, not only for opposing democratic concepts, but also opposing his own party. So he is the single representative who votes against the president the most. And with this president, that doesn't work. So this long history he has of looking to anger people, of getting his jollies off ruining someone else's day, of being the one dissenting vote because I get to didn't work with Trump. So Finally, Trump said, I am going to replace him with an actual Republican who will support what I'm trying to do. And Massie freaked out. He had finally gone too far, and he realized that although he had enough name recognition to beat the no-names who ran against him, if Donald Trump would actually endorse someone in this race, he wouldn't just lose. They had a poll. Would you vote for no name endorsed by Donald Trump or Thomas Massie. And Thomas Massie lost 3-1 against no name, an imaginary figure or Thomas Massie. And he realized that. And ever since then, he has ramped up the crazy on everything. While Biden was president, Massie didn't mention Epstein once. In the history of when Epstein was arrested until Trump said, I'm going to find someone to run against Massie, Massie had mentioned Epstein 4 times on the record. In the months since, Massie has mentioned Epstein, has tweeted about Epstein 400 times, has held a press conference with the extreme left, trying to tie Epstein to Trump with signs that Trump should be in prison. Because what he's hoping to do is that when this election happens, that if Trump endorses someone, he can say, oh, it's about the Epstein files, an issue that he hopes will get votes for him. He's trying to reframe this as him voting against the party to bring up all kinds of distractions. And he's very happy to use these women who are so horribly victimized to victimize them again to try to improve his election, while the far left is very happy to use him the same way he's using them because they're in a war against Trump. He's in a war against Trump. They're natural allies. And now, as he's desperate for money, he's desperate for support. He just asked Senator Rand Paul, Kentucky's junior senator, to do a series of events. He's doing them this week all across Kentucky, all across his district. Senator Paul is loyal to a fault. Massie, back when he was just a weird kid in shorts, volunteered for Rand Paul. Rand Paul showed up for him. And it's very weird for a sitting congressman to ask someone else to come to events for him a year and a half before elections. The reason Massie did that is because Massie is terrified. He's terrified that he's going to lose the only shred of power he has. And now, in his desperation for money, he's concocted this ridiculous anti-Semitic story, taking a picture of me praying with Speaker Johnson, who is actually a leader who is fighting for his party's agenda and trying to improve this country. A picture of us praying together and making some weird anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that I control Congress. I appreciate he thinks so much of me, but sadly, it's not true. And then begging people for money, please give money. They're out to get me. They're gunning for me. And according to him, he raised $10,000 from that ridiculously anti-Semitic tweet, including $5,000 from one person, which when we talk about legal limits is a whole separate issue. But his other faults are on the side for a second. But
and I want to go to this tweet. You said, when was this? When did you tweet this?
So he tweeted on Rosh Hashanah.
Right. When did you put out the original tweet?
So I visited the Capitol as chaplain on September 12th.
Okay, so
September 11th.
September 11th, day after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and of course the 24th anniversary of the horrendous 9/11 attacks. You tweeted. Correct. I'm going to tweet. I'm going to read. It says, today I had been invited by my friend Rep. Andy Barr to serve as the guest chaplain in the House of Representatives. I'm deeply grateful to Speaker Johnson for sharing a moment of private prayer and conversation above the National Mall. His demeanor is what the nation needs right now. And Thomas Massie tweeted, Speaker Johnson just met privately with the Kentucky AIPAC guy who's been trying to defeat me for many years because I won't fund foreign wars and I don't vote for foreign aid to any country. They're gunning for me. Can you help by donating here? Now, before I pose a question to you, I just want to note that the gunning for me thing is also very
wild,
very wild, especially because people in Thomas Massie's internet spaces or equivalent internet spaces have been running rampant with these crazy theories about Israel being involved in murdering Charlie Kirk. So it's impossible to not see that. If you are not seeing that, you are intentionally.
Massie follows many prominent neo-Nazis on Twitter. If you look at Massie's follow list, who he follows, it's a insane list of just nutbag white supremacists and anti-Semites.
So for those who, I mean, there's so many questions here, but just for the record, what is your relationship with the local AIPAC branch in Kentucky?
So there actually isn't an AIPAC branch in Kentucky. There's a regional office in Atlanta. I have no affiliation with AIPAC whatsoever. I did attend their policy conference a time or two, but if attending a conference makes you a member, I'm also a member of the FBI. I'm a member of the Holocaust Museum. I'm a member of B'nai
Right.
B'rith.
And also, just for those who don't know, Rabbi Litvin and his family run Chabad at Kentucky University. Uh,
Out of the University of Kentucky, yeah.
I apologize, University of Kentucky. Shluchim of the Lubavitcher Rebbe serving on college campus are not exactly the billionaire donor class that people are trying to accuse of having all sorts of influence across politics in America, or some sort of buying Congress people or senators or anything like that. So that's what makes also this ridiculous attack even more insane. Um, it's right. It's fair to say that you're not maxing out your donations across the board to various APAC endorsed candidates.
Part of my employment, I am unable to give political donations at all. I've never given a cent to any politician, including ones that I truly support and who I feel are hugely positive influences for America, which I'm very glad that I do have in my representation in Kentucky.
So where did this even come from? How does he get you as the APAC guy, and where, like, have you ever interacted with Thomas Massie?
See, a few times. Now, he did meet with APAC once during my tenure in Kentucky. I was not a part of that meeting. So the only time he ever met with APAC, and as he sat down in the meeting with them, he told them, "I will never meet with you again," to a group of his constituents. "I will never meet with you again." That's how he started the meeting. So I was not in that meeting. However, again, I have attended
It's
APAC.
amazing. So you weren't even in the meeting. Okay. Well, is there
Yeah,
someone with a beard? Did he
I have attended
confuse the
to.
Jewish people?
It was mostly Christian people. I live in Kentucky. Um, so Massey has told people the reason he doesn't support Israel is he doesn't have Jews in his district, which is not true. He actually does have Jews in his district. He just refuses to meet with them. And he has this. So again, there are other people in Kentucky. For example, Senator Paul. Senator Paul is generally a budget hawk. Senator Paul is against any foreign spending. I've worked closely with his office on things like visas. I've worked closely with his office on several other issues. And I have no problem with Senator Paul. That is entirely different from someone who goes out of his way to be the one vote against recognizing that anti-Semitism exists, for example. And this is not the first insane anti-Semitic tweet that Thomas Massie has tweeted. He put out a tweet 2 years ago during the end of COVID. He put out a tweet ostensibly quoting Voltaire. "Look at who you're not able to criticize, and that's who controls you." It's actually a tweet from a white supremacist pedophile from America. I'm not surprised those are his heroes, but it's not a Voltaire tweet, and it's far from the first anti-Semitic tweet he had. So he has a history of this rabid anti-Semitism. He flew a Confederate flag outside his house till his grandmother made him take it down, and he has this series of backward views, and he tries to wrap it up in, "Oh, I'm anti-establishment." There are plenty of anti-establishment people who don't go into racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry, and who don't betray American values. It's worth noting the right to address your government is part of the First Amendment. The right of Jewish citizens to speak to their representative is part of the First Amendment. When I reached out together with Northern Kentucky leaders and Jewish leaders from across the country, we were working on a prison reform bill. A prison reform is something that Lubavitcher has spoken many times about the need for prisons to be, as they are called in America, penitentiaries, places where someone can be penitent, reformatories, places where someone can reform. We reached out, we want to discuss prison reform, and his office answered back, "We don't meet with representatives of foreign countries." I'm an American. I'm the second rabbi in Kentucky's history to be born in Kentucky
Wait a
and
second.
serve in Kentucky.
They put that in writing?
Writing, yeah, from his chief of staff.
Okay, so you have to, just for the audience here, and this is something that is now kind of the new level of anti-Semitism, and I'm laughing just because it's so outrageous. Is and it's weird for me to say credit to Nick Fuentes, but Nick Fuentes is honest about his perspective and what's going on, and he is very forthright about his opinion. And I think Nick Fuentes is wrong about a heck of a lot, right? Nick Fuentes is a very hateful person, um, but he's honest in saying that he philosophically can't understand Jews being citizens of other countries, and he's grappling with that openly in a not, I'm not going to say an intellectual way, but he's at least putting the cards on the table. But what's going on, as we saw with Tucker Carlson 2 days ago, when he said that Israel pushed America into the Iraq War, what the Tucker Carlsons and the Massies of the world are doing is they're basically saying you are Jewish, therefore you're not a citizen of America. You are, by definition, Israeli, which is just a whole nother level of insanity.
And it's insanity that was directly countered by our founding fathers. Again, these are not just anti-Semitic views. These are deeply anti-American views. John Adams, who, by the way, was a Zionist. John Adams said, "I would love to see the reestablishment of a homeland for the Jews." Also, when crafting the Massachusetts Constitution, he wrote there should be rights for Jews here. He's the first person to ever suggest that in America. George Washington wrote to the synagogue in Newport, and he said, "You are welcome citizens." What's very funny is Jews were so used to the government changing and then their fate changing, they reached out to John Adams and he became president and said, like, "We hope you'll also be kind to the Jews." And he responds with almost like a pithy response. He's like, "Of course I'm going to, what do you mean? This is America. What kind of a stupid question is that? Of course we're not going to treat people differently because of the God they worship." So this rejection, and it was recognized as such, for example, during the Second World War, when you had people like Charles Lindbergh and Father Coughlin giving the same exact speeches, the same speeches that I read books as a child of Catholic priests getting up on Easter Sunday and saying, "They killed our Lord, now go kill them," to cause pogroms in Europe, is no different than the speech that Tucker gave about the yarmulke wearing hummus eating Jews who killed their Lord and now
Well,
killed Charlie.
he didn't say yarmulke. He just said that the story.
Hummus eating Jews.
He says Charlie's assassination reminds him of his favorite story from the Bible. He could almost imagine people eating hummus, saying how they're going to kill Yushka. Okay, yeah, this is insane. Wait,
Yeah.
how did you respond when he says, "I don't meet with representatives of foreign governments"?
I said I'm not a representative of foreign government, so I am as Kentucky as people come. I am very proud to serve on the Council of Ambassadors for the Kentucky Colonels, which is the highest civilian award Kentucky gives out. I am both a Duke of Paducah and a Duke of Hazard, two cities in eastern and western Kentucky, where I have contributed towards the cities and I was awarded civilian honor. I am an ambassador of the Bluegrass. I very proudly am a Kentuckian. I'm a massive Kentuckian. I go to horse races every year. I do a menorah lighting at a horse race every year. I serve on the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. I'm the first Orthodox Jew to ever hold a government position in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And the idea that I'm a representative of a foreign country, or as he said many times, foreign influences, is a bizarre anti-Semitic lie that he knows is a bizarre anti-Semitic lie.
Right. I also don't. It's funny. We're two people who follow the teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I don't know how down the rabbit hole we want to get for any listener that might not know some of the ins and outs. But it's 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 also a massive. I'm gonna say it's ignorant, but it's also very anti-Semitic in the sense that he's basically saying all Jews must think the same as each other, and you're basically grouping everyone together. Whether you live in Israel, you live in Australia, you live in Canada, you live in Kentucky, you're basically saying Jews, okay, you're Israeli, which it's just crazy.
So it's very funny. One of his followers, to show that I am an AIPAC representative, took pictures of like 50 tweets I had written that had the word AIPAC in it. And I pointed out that the large majority of those tweets was actually me being critical, me saying they should be doing more, they should be invested here. They like is not me saying I represent them, but is me from the outside saying, here's what I wish they were doing. So yeah, the idea that Chabad is AIPAC is just a bizarre.
I'll tell you a story. I was a college when I was in college, and I was invited. Actually, there was this AIPAC event for college activists, and I was one of the very few people who was openly a conservative political person and also involved in the pro-Israel movement on campuses. And someone who I'm actually friends with now, but they misunderstood a conversation I was having with someone, and they thought that I was going to protest the Christians United for Israel conference. So I actually had a representative from AIPAC pull me aside and confront me, thinking that I was going to protest the Christians United for Israel conference. And I said, "Do you understand that of the 300 people here, I'm probably one of the only ones who actually is perhaps to the right of Christians United for Israel, if not completely supportive of what they're doing. And I actually don't agree with a lot of what you're doing. In fact, I remember the fights on campus and the BDS resolutions and everything like that. And you had a lot of these AIPAC groups who were so scared of working with the likes of Charlie Kirk because they didn't want to be seen as too conservative. So they were actually trying to work with progressive causes to make it a kind of a DEI supporting Israel issue. So the whole notion that you would have someone from a Chabad movement as an APAC person is on its face just laughable, which is why I laughed when he said you're a foreign foreign agent. And also it's deeply troubling that members of Congress would even put something like that in writing. I'm not saying I would excuse it in a locker room talk to quote the president, but I'm actually having trouble understanding how someone could write that.
There's a part of this that needs to be understood, which is number one, he wrote this on Rosh Hashanah, and he knew it was Rosh Hashanah because I emailed his office, as I do every political office in Kentucky, and informed them when Rosh Hashanah is, when Yom Kippur is, and what the proper greeting would be if they want to acknowledge the Jewish community on the holiday. Spoiler alert: he didn't send out a Rosh Hashanah tweet. But in case he wanted to, I try to help people have the correct language. I always love when you see like Planned Parenthood of Michigan post like 3 matzahs and it says Happy Rosh Hashanah, and it's like, come
Even
on, guys,
even someone who we might agree with, Elise Stefanik, put a menorah in her Rosh Hashanah.
yeah, come on,
Medical
like
yeah, it's a little bit of that kind
it's
of
just like you're not talking. There's no rabbi on staff, so I always try. I'm like, here's the images that would be appropriate for this holiday. Here's the language that would be appropriate for this holiday. Here's what would not be appropriate for this holiday. So by the time Yom Tif ended, by the time the holiday ended, I was able to turn on my phone again. I had received dozens of death threats. I was in my synagogue, which is a publicly listed place, all day leading services. Actually, in the afternoon of the second day of Rosh Hashanah, after this tweet had already gone out, I was walking 7.5 miles to visit older congregants who can't make it to synagogue to blow shofar for them. So I was walking down main streets with, I mean, thank God, Lexington Police Department is incredible. The leadership we have in Lexington is just fantastic. I think it's important to note that a lot of people look at Massie and then say, oh, well, look at the Kentucky's a bunch of racists. Massie in no way represents the Commonwealth of Kentucky. His hate does not have a home here. And I get calls from Republicans in his district all the time who tell me this does not represent me. Lexington is just absolutely amazing. But I walked 7 miles not knowing that he literally put a target on my back. He tweeted a picture of my face, said I was gunning for him, that I'm working, that I'm part of a international cabal. Between then and now, I've probably received 35, 40 death threats directly referencing the tweet. And not just
what
comments under this saying that we should get him, but messages on Facebook, messages on Instagram. I posted 2 weeks ago. I had a dumpster delivered to Chabad so I can clean up some branches before the holiday. And the dumpster delivered had a dead possum in it. And I wrote to the city like this, you shouldn't be delivering dumpsters that have rotting animals in it. It's a health hazard. And someone commented, that'll be you. This is a post that I posted 2 weeks ago. Like they went through my social media, found the post they wanted to comment on, and said, we stand with Massie, that's going to be you. So there's a real threat here.
and it's
Besides,
also noting that Chabad on campus and being involved in a community is a family affair. You have, thank God, many young children.
7 young children
Yeah,
who actively help lead the Chabad house. Yeah.
so a lot of
Um,
these crazy people when they, it's very scary.
so thank God I don't just have the First Amendment right to address my government. I also have the Second Amendment right. But no, it's a very scary thing. And we are going to have to spend more now on Yom Kippur for additional security. It's just not a risk that I can take, not for myself, but for my community. I don't have the right to take that risk. It's a major event. It's advertised. People know about it, and we will have to have additional security now because of this threat, because of the fact that in the
It's
last
just it's
48
hard.
hours,
Listen, when we spell it out very clearly, right? You are a rabbi in a community offering a service for free to members of the community so they can connect with the Lord and on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. And you need additional security because a sitting US congressperson accused you in writing of gunning for him and being a representative of a foreign government.
it's the third
Eh,
most powerful man in the country.
right. And correct. And that you're somehow also plotting now against him and gunning for him with the Speaker of the House. And this is like, I mean, I saw some people commenting about this on Twitter, but how come this isn't like front page news? That's what it's
I don't understand
done.
that. I do know that I am associated with the Kentucky Jewish Council, which is the leading advocate for Jews in the Commonwealth. They put out a statement across media condemning this. I don't know if they've received any responses whatsoever, but I haven't received a single call from media. And I will tell
Except
you
for me,
that
my podcast.
sadly, except for you, thank you, Daniel, that I don't consider you media. I consider media dirty. No.
Yeah, no. You're saying
Mhm.
for me, it's an interest story. I didn't understand even the extent of it. I understood some. I know I saw you had a thing with Daryl Cooper with him. I mean, that guy's just a complete anti-Semite off the rails. He actually makes Thomas Massie look kind of normal, and which is saying something. But I, I just cannot believe after what you've told me here that this isn't on the front page of even say the New York Times. You have I mean, imagine if this was a different religious
The
group.
New York Times, the Jewish Insider, Jewish Journal, the Forward,
Right.
Haaretz, the Jewish. Okay, Haaretz isn't a Jewish paper, but the other ones, which actually are Jewish.
I don't imagine
It's
imagine if
crazy to me they're
instead
not covering this.
but imagine instead of a Jewish person, imagine if it was a Muslim.
It would literally be front page news in every paper in the country.
It would be it would be riots. You'd have every single Al Sharpton would show up. This is crazy. I don't understand.
Yeah. I don't know what to tell you.
It's just, it's hard to actually and to me it also highlights the threat that some of this the seeping, poisonous, cancerous anti-Semitism has in the conservative movement, in MAGA, and in the Republican Party. I think it's super important that people begin really speaking out about it. It's a major problem. I was watching, I go through some of this crazy media just so that I can get a better sense of what we're facing. And you have people like Dave Smith who is welcoming the Jew hating Max Blumenthal onto his show, saying that Max Blumenthal is essentially a hero of his, and then he learns everything he knows about Israel and Palestine from Max Blumenthal, and then that
Six.
person, right, and then that person's debating at Turning Point USA, and that person is going on Tucker Carlson's podcast, and then Tucker Carlson is making all sorts of anti-Semitic hints all the time, and then Candace is having them on, and then that's how you end up with the USS Liberty crazy people also coming and it's just a massive web of misinformation that is poisoning the American mind, and they're just playing off of each other and saying, oh well, look, this podcast had that, so that means it's in the news. People are talking about it. The internet's talking about it. And next thing you know, there's 25 million views on something that's completely nonsense. So how many people on all these dark websites and everything else have seen that you have a sitting rabbi in Kentucky, quote unquote, gunning for a sitting US congressperson? That's a major threat.
There was a remarkable moment in media this week where the host of a talk show walked off her own show because the other hosts were so ridiculously
Michaels.
anti-Semitic, Jillian Michaels. And what's remarkable is she asked them, where are you getting this from? This anti-Semitic conspiracy you're spreading, where are you getting it from? What's your source? And one of the hosts actually said, well, people are talking about it. Like, I don't need a source if other people are talking about it on Twitter. It's a part of the conversation now. And that's how it happens. Candace Owens says something so insanely unhinged that like the only recourse is for the first lady of France to have to prove her biology in court. And now it's just part of the public record. It's something we're talking about. And what's remarkable is that anything that Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson ostensibly stands for is the polar opposite of what Max Blumenthal stands for. Max
It's actually funny.
Blumenthal
It's funny.
is
It's
an
funny
insane
that
leftist in the country.
correct, and he's funded likely by Iran or Russia, and
Well, I
actually
mean,
Nick
so is
Clegg.
Tucker, so that's no different. But it just proves when Tucker Carlson goes to Russia and stands in a subway station that was
Correct.
built
Yes.
by the Soviets for the entire purpose of showing it to Americans to try to make it seem like Soviet Russia was successful. And he compliments how beautiful it is without noting the now clearly understood history. This was built by Soviets to lie about their country. It's like going to North Korea and seeing the one fat kid they show you and going, oh, everyone must be healthy here. Look at the fat kid. I mean,
Right.
it's propaganda. It's
Correct.
feeding propaganda. So I don't know if they were paying him or not, but you couldn't buy better help than that. But
Did
it
you
just
catch?
proves.
Did you catch Fuentes's take on this? I thought it was actually quite excellent. Weirdly enough, he said
I
he's
rarely
actually
catch fun.
Sorry?
I rarely catch Fuentes' take.
What he said was he called Candace low IQ anti-Semitism because he's high IQ anti-Semitism, and he says Candace is just making these insane things based on nothing, whereas he has facts. And then he's actually mad at Tucker because he says Tucker's doing it for money. So Fuentes is saying, listen, I get canceled. I have the consequence. You guys are doing it just to make money. You're doing it just because you want to be popular. So he's actually ribbing them about
Like,
it.
he
And then
really oh,
exactly. And then he goes off on Jackson Hinkle saying Jackson Hinkle doesn't even know what communism is, but he claims to be a communist, so he's terrible. And then he says Max Blumenthal is also just a paid shill. You just take a look at him, and but he doesn't even realize that Max Blumenthal's not even Jewish. But he says like
yeah,
the Jewish Max Blumenthal, but it's it's just the whole thing is crazy. Yeah, like Fuentes says, I'm doing it Lishma. I'm doing it because I don't care about the money, and you guys are bad because you need to get paid to do it.
it's amazing. It's
But
almost inspirational.
yeah, and then you take someone like Jake Shields, right?
We should fulfill the word of God like Nick Fuentes, who does it out of passion, and not like
Exactly,
Tucker Carlson and Max
exactly.
Blumenthal who do it for money.
And then this is how stupid these conspiracy theories are. Also, Jake Shields, the retired MMA fighter who took like
Way too many
200,
blows to the head.
250 too many blows to the head. He is mad that Israel could be a Jewish state and that the leftist Jews are then quote unquote poisoning America with their leftist values, but he doesn't realize that religious Jews would also be opposed to leftist Jews doing that. So he thinks that all Jews think the same, but he can't understand that by the definition of what he's explaining, clearly all Jews do not think the same. So he's
A brilliant conversation recently. This week, Megyn Kelly was at a Turning Point event, and someone asks a question, and the question comes across reasonable. I'm concerned about the influence of money in politics, and he mentions two or three billionaires, and she answers a good answer. That their money influences, but certainly money influences politics. And he goes, "So you're not concerned about Jew billionaires?" And she's like, "Whoa, hey, like
yeah.
your question
And
seems so rational till you rephrase it as Jew billionaires."
by the
And
way,
I'm
again, this is also so funny. No, the two people she mentioned were Bill Ackman and Dr. Bob Shillman. Now, I happen to have met Dr. Bob. I've known him for over a decade. I haven't spoken to him in a long time, but the idea that this person has mass influence over mainstream politicians is hysterical. Now, there's been a realignment of who is quote unquote important in the world in the time of Trump. But Dr. Bob was funding David Horowitz Freedom Center. He was he was certainly helping get the truth to the surface. But the idea that this is a mainstream APAC person is also just wild. And then Bill Ackman really started contributing to Jewish causes in the last 2 years after October 7th. So just the
really
whole
only after the protest started in America.
right. So the whole premise of it, if you want to if you want to say, listen, I'm concerned about someone like Dr. Miriam Adelson or something like that, and you have an intellectual discussion about how someone reconciles multiple identities, you can have that discussion. That's not actually anti-Semitic, but the fact that they just pick out two people that were brought up by Max Blumenthal tells you everything you need to know about the conversation. And I also just touch on this Megyn thing very quickly, is that Megyn seems to be very perplexed why people were so upset with some of the people she was platforming and what was going on, and she doesn't understand that the issue is not the conversation. The issue is what information is being brought to the conversation. Nobody has a problem if you want to debate the merits of what's going on in Gaza or what's going on in Judea and Samaria. In fact, I think you'd have a very riveting conversation if you just took 6 Israelis off the street. The issue is when you're bringing in these conspiracy theorists like Tucker Carlson, like Dave Smith, like Candace Owens, and you are shifting the Overton window so that Jewish people then have to defend whether or not they even care about America. That's where it's going in a whole different direction. So the issue is
And even
never
more
about
than that,
yeah,
these people are often seeking legitimacy. You have someone like Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz was always a degenerate and always had issues with young women. and his father, like any caring father, was able to cover up his crimes and able to put him in a position to be in the state house in Florida. I don't fault his dad for that. That's a great dad. He then managed to get to Congress, where his dad wasn't in control of Congress and couldn't cover up his crimes anymore, and was soon exposed. If you're Venmoing a friend for getting you underage women, you shouldn't write that in the Venmo. That's a poor decision. Aside from the poor moral decision of being a sex offender, he then gets removed from Congress in disgrace, and he's desperately trying to now rebuild his political reputation in Florida, where his father can help him again. And so for the last week, he's been posting pictures with Charlie when Charlie's not around to defend himself from being associated with a sex offender, and saying, "Look, I was friends with Charlie. I'm good. Vote for me." When Tucker Carlson, if Tucker Carlson was on his show and said the homeless Jews killed Charlie, is one thing. When he's given the platform at Charlie's funeral with the most powerful man in the world in the room, it gives it more of a power. It goes out to millions more people. That's why it's so concerning to so many people when he was hosted by Charlie at Turning Point, when he's on Megyn Kelly, things like that, because he doesn't necessarily say the most extremist thing there. Dave Smith didn't say his craziest stuff when he debated Josh Hammer, mostly because Josh would have torn him to shreds if he brought up the craziest stuff. He says he said like the middle stuff, genocide, this, that, but
Oh, he
like
says
saying that
you can't
they
be
have this
pro-life and
hunting
support Israel.
child in Gaza and moving. Yeah, okay, so that's a pretty insane position, but it was just a talking
Right.
point. I'm saying his talking points on Israel, which Josh is coming there ready to dismantle. He didn't bring up his
Correct.
craziest stuff, but what he says is, "Look at me, I'm respectable, I'm on stage with Charlie Kirk," and then he sits down with Daryl Cooper, who he calls the greatest historian in America, and says we should have sided with Hitler.
Right.
And as someone whose parents are survivors, we should have sided with Hitler.
Right.
So
Or
that's
Tucker
the problem.
interviewing George
So
Stephanopoulos' sister and not even mentioning any of that stuff. I mean, the Tucker Carlson at Fox, if he would have been given 10 minutes to talk to George Stephanopoulos' sister, it would have been 8 minutes about the Clintons. Instead, he turns this into an opportunity to
yeah.
just make up all these stories about Israel.
Now I will say I am grateful for that interview because I didn't know she existed, and now I understand the reason that George Stephanopoulos still looks this good at 65 is that if he ever looks his sister in the face, his face will melt like Dorian Gray. That's how he's staying so young. His sister is aging for the both of them. He's staying young for the both of them. But yes, so when he has these unhinged takes, when he chooses, by the way, he didn't choose an Arab Christian. I have Arab Christian friends. I have an Arab Christian friend who's a preacher in Jerusalem whose name is Nasrallah. I love that I have a friend named Nasrallah. I have a friend, Pastor Salash, who lives in Nazareth, who brings blankets and warmers to IDF soldiers in the winter. This is a very proud Arab Christian. He didn't speak to them. He chose to speak to an American who moved there, a Western leftist who moved to Judea and Samaria for the official opinion of Arab Christians. It's beyond bizarre.
And has a very colored history. Her whole history is crazy. Her whole history was just of getting in fights. She actually got in fights with the Palestinian Authority. So the whole and none of that was brought up. It was only used as a battering ram against.
But again, yeah,
Jewish.
he brings a kook, then he's brought on mainstream shows, and the kook is now mainstream.
Correct. Exactly. And the thing also about Tucker that's so nefarious is that he goes right up to the line. Like you have to actually follow what he's saying to understand what's so dangerous about it. So like I saw this after Rosh Hashanah when I was back online and the clip was going around of what he said on Glenn Greenwald's show, which I just talked about before. But when he's saying, "Oh, Israel brought us into the Iraq War," and then the normal person who's taking Tucker at face value will say, "Well, let's go through the history. What are you talking about? Let's see what Israel said." Of course, Israel didn't tell America to go into the Iraq War. Israel was against
In
it.
fact, Sharon was strongly against it. Yeah.
Exactly. But then you have to understand Tucker's language and how he's talking about these issues. And then you understand that when he says Israel, he means Jewish Americans. So instead of saying neocons, he's now saying Israel. So he's trying to actually emphasize the dual loyalty point. But if you haven't followed Tucker very carefully for the last year, you won't understand that, which is how he gets away with half the stuff.
Do you know who has hundreds of recorded hours advocating strongly for the Iraq War?
Tucker
Tucker
Carlson.
Carlson. Yeah,
Right, but then
advocating very
but the way to get out the way he gets out of that now is gonna say, "Oh, so you had the Israelis that were infecting people's minds with bad ideas," and then it becomes this concept that you have people that are disloyal to America, that are disloyal to the interests of America, that are manipulating our media, controlling Hollywood, and gunning for our Congress people, like Thomas Massie says about you, and that's how you end up with this insane alternative universe. It really is an alternative universe.
but the danger of Massey, for example, is that so with, for example, Daryl Cooper on his own page, he writes to me and other Jews, "You evil, vile, sex offending, whatever," what he wrote to me. But then he goes on Joe Rogan and I'm the preeminent historian that, oh, from, well, a historical thing, if you look at it, Hitler was right. So he has this air of respectability on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan promotes him. People go to see what he says and are exposed to all these kinds of lies. And then from Joe Rogan, it goes to here, to here, to here. And you
Right.
have, as we see, this washing respectability. Massey is the entire production in one person. He is a sitting U.S. congressman. So
Yep.
whatever he says automatically has authority. And he's saying the Jews are gunning for me. This rabbi who's praying. And it's not even that he took the picture and took out my caption. He doesn't care. They know he's lying. He knows he's lying. Nobody cares. And the neo-Nazis that he's advertising to, he said that he in 2 hours he raised $10,000, including 5,000 from one person. He was excited to share that because he knows what the target audience wants. He knows who he's advertising this tweet to. He knows that those he follows, the neo-Nazis and white supremacists he follows, will send him money. And he knows he can't raise that money in northern Kentucky in his district because they hate those views. He doesn't say those views when he's going around Kentucky with Rand Paul in these events. He says, I'm standing up for libertarian and Republican values, that I'm fighting to keep our government small and the debt. He doesn't talk about any of these issues in his district. He just says, remember my name. I'm currently in office. Look, I'm friends with Rand Paul. Please vote for me again. And he's hoping to God that with all the stuff on Trump's plate, that Trump won't be able to focus on this race. His biggest fear is that Trump will support an actual Republican who actually supports Republican ideals in Northern Kentucky, in which case he'll be launched out of Congress so fast, they'll be like Ilhan Omar on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Right. And I'll say this just before we close in a moment, but I've seen this as a theme about people that are trying to get away with scam or something like this. They're just hoping that people don't pay attention to what they say on corners of the internet or on their website, for example. And I have that it's thematic. It's not just with these anti-Semites, although the anti-Semites do it quite well. They're playing both sides. They're hoping people aren't paying close enough attention. It is very scary. Before I let you go, do you have a thought for this week's Parsha? Not to put you on the spot, but if you had about a minute or two, a thought just to leave for the viewers here so we can get a little bit inspired despite this darkness.
So I think there's a uniquely American message in this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha, in today's Aliyah, in today's Chitas. So Jewish people study one portion of the weekly portion every day. In today's portion, Moses says to the Jewish people, when you enter the land, when you have all the blessings, the milk and the honey and the fruit and the wheat, and then you turn against God. Not you're turning away from God out of desperation, out of confusion, out of fear. God's given you everything, and you still turn against God. I wrote this book for your children to remember the promise. He clearly says this is not intended for perfect people. This is intended for the children of sinners, for sinners and their children, that this promise is still there, that I will return you to the land, that my word is not broken, that my covenant is everlasting. It's this amazing message, especially as Jews around the world prepare for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the day in which we look back at the past year this week. We have regret over the past. Here's what I wish I did better in the next year. On Yom Kippur itself, we have intention for the future. I want to do better in the next year. God says, I am aware that you sinned and I wrote the Torah for you. My promise is specifically for you. The idea that our Constitution wasn't for a utopia. Our God is not created for a utopia. The founders were very aware that men were imperfect, which is why the most incredible thing about the Constitution is that it can change, is they left open this system where we can add amendments as we need to, because they recognized that people will change. It's because America is founded on the values found in the Torah, on the values found in the Hebrew scripture. So Moses says very clearly, it's his last words to the Jewish people. This book is not for the perfect ones. This book is not for me, Moses says. This book is for you. This book is for you, Daniel, for me, for all of our listeners. It's the word of God for all people. And God promises we will return to the land. Jews will dwell securely in that land, and we will build the third temple, a house of prayer for all mankind.
Amen. Rabbi, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for those words. And God should protect you and your family. You should be safe in the face of these vicious threats. And God willing, the Commonwealth of Kentucky will have leadership that it deserves, and you'll be free from some of
Amen.
tyrannical government, anti-Semitism. So here's to better days. And if anything develops, I really hope you'll make me aware of it so we can continue to talk about it and get this issue out there. So thank you so much for joining.